Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The blade of the scythe hooked around my waist, pulling me flush against the cold, armored chest of the Lich King, just as the vampire lord's fangs grazed the sensitive skin of my neck, his breath ghosting over my pulse like a promise of ruin. "You thought you could log out?" Alaric whispered, his voice a velvet caress that betrayed the lethal sharp nails digging into my shoulder. "You thought you could raise us, tame us, and then simply leave." The crimson warning box of the system hovered in my peripheral vision. Asterisk critical error, anomaly detected. Forced disconnection failed asterisk, but it was drowned out by the low, guttural growl of Kalen, the Beast Emperor, who blocked the only exit to the throne room. His golden eyes, once filled with the adoration of a rescued pup, now burned with the predatory hunger of a wolf who had finally cornered his favorite meal. I wasn't the player anymore. I was the prey. My name is Julian, and until 3 years ago, I was just a quality assurance tester for Abyssal Monarch, the world's most punishing VR horror MMORPG. The game was notorious for its tragic villains, bosses whose backstories were written in blood and tears, designed to make the players feel guilty before forcing them to strike the killing blow. But I knew the code. I knew the glitches. And, arguably my biggest mistake, I had a bleeding heart. When I was transported into the game, not as a hero, but as a nameless, powerless NPC merchant, I decided I wouldn't play by the script. I wouldn't let them become monsters. I used my knowledge of the timeline to find them before their corruption arcs began. I fed the starving damper child who would become Alaric. I unchained the wolf boy Kalen from the gladiator pits before his mind shattered. I sat in the silent library with Silas, the cursed necromancer, holding his hand so he wouldn't succumb to the madness of the voices in his head. I raised them. I comforted them. I became their father figure, their brother, their entire world. I thought I had saved them. I thought I had rewritten the tragedy into a redemption arc. I was wrong. I hadn't removed the darkness. I had simply redirected it. Instead of hating the world, they became obsessed with the one thing that showed them kindness. The massive ebony doors of the obsidian spire rattled as thunder shook the castle. Outside, the endgame event had begun. The system, realizing the plot had derailed, was trying to purge the data. The sky was a fracturing mosaic of digital purple and apocalyptic red. But inside the spire, the atmosphere was suffocating for a different reason. I stood in the center of the grand hall. The three of them surrounded me, a triangle of overwhelming power that made the air vibrate. Alaric, the vampire lord, sat upon the central throne, one leg crossed over the other elegantly. He wore a high-collared coat of midnight velvet, open at the chest to reveal pale, marble skin. He swirled a goblet of wine, or perhaps blood, looking at me with half-lidded, crimson eyes. "The sky is falling, Julian," Alaric said softly. "The gods of this world, your developers, are trying to delete us. And yet, you are the only thing on my mind." To my left stood Kalen. He had grown since the days I smuggled him scraps of meat in the arena. He was massive now, a towering wall of muscle and scars, wearing furs and leather that did little to hide the primal power of his frame. His ears twitched, and his tail, usually expressive, was still. "They want to take you back," Kalen rumbled, his voice vibrating in the floorboards. "To that other place. The place where you are not ours." To my right, floating slightly above the ground, was Silas. The Lich King didn't breathe. His face was obscured by a veil of shadow magic, but I could feel his gaze, cold, intense, and terrifyingly possessive. Skeletal hands, wreathed in green flame, twitched at his sides. I tried to trigger the logout sequence, I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "The system, it's going to wipe this server. If I stay, I die with you. If I leave, I might be able to petition the admins to save the character data." It was a lie. A logical lie, but a lie nonetheless. I knew if I left, the company would delete Abyssal Monarch within the hour to scrub the AI anomaly. I was trying to escape to save myself. Alaric stood up. The movement was a blur, faster than the game's frame rate should allow. In an instant, he was in front of me, his hand gripping my chin, tilting my head up. "You are a terrible liar, my sweet guardian," Alaric purred. "You always were." Remember when you told me you weren't afraid of me, even as your heart hammered like a trapped bird against your ribs? I did that to save you. I snapped, trying to pull away, but his grip was iron. Everything I did was to keep you from becoming monsters. And look at us, Silas's voice echoed, not from a mouth, but directly into my mind. It was the sound of dry leaves skittering on stone. We are not monsters to the world, Julian. We are monsters only for you. Kalen stepped closer, the heat radiating off him clashing with Alaric's cold. We shared you. The wolfman growled, a hint of a whine in his tone. We agreed to the truce. Alaric takes the nights. I take the hunts. Silas takes the quiet moments. We shared the only thing that matters. But you trying to leave? That breaks the treaty. There is no treaty if we're all deleted. I shouted, panic rising. Suddenly, the room turned red. A blaring siren echoed from the heavens. A massive holographic window appeared in the center of the room. System admin intervention. Purge protocol activated. Deleting assets in 3, 2, ***. They're here, I whispered. The roof of the spire was torn open, not by wind, but by a giant, glitching hand of code, the avatar of the developer. It reached down, bypassing the bosses, aiming straight for me. I was the bug. I was the anchor holding this corrupted narrative together. Julian, Kalen roared. He launched himself into the air, his body shifting, bones cracking as he transformed into a massive, midnight black dire wolf. He slammed into the giant digital hand, his jaws clamping onto the translucent code. Sparks of blue data flew like blood. Silas, Alaric barked a command, shedding his elegance instantly. Bind the reality anchor. Don't let them disconnect him. Silas raised his staff. Green spectral chains erupted from the floor, not attacking the enemy, but wrapping around my ankles, my wrists, my waist. What are you doing? I screamed, struggling against the necrotic magic. It didn't hurt, but it numbed my body, locking me in place. Securing our asset, Silas's voice whispered in my mind. Alaric drew his rapier, the blade glowing with a blood-red aura. He looked at me, a tragic, beautiful smile on his face. If the world burns, Julian, let it burn. But you do not leave this room. He launched himself at the sky. The battle was a blur of high fantasy magic against sci-fi brutality. The system tried to rewrite them, to delete their textures, to nullify their AI. But I had done my job too well. I had raised them with love, and that love had evolved into a fanatical willpower that transcended the game's binary code. Kalen was tearing chunks out of the admin tool, his health bar dropping rapidly, but he didn't stop. Silas was chanting in a forgotten tongue, creating a barrier of souls that absorbed the deletion beams. Alaric moved like a dancer, striking the weak points in the code that I had once pointed out to him during our strategy lessons years ago. Why? I thought, tears blurring my vision. Why fight a losing battle? Just let me go. The giant hand descended again, swatting Kalen aside. He crashed into the stone wall, his health bar blinking red. Kalen! I screamed. The hand grasped me. The sensation was cold, sterile. I felt my avatar beginning to dissolve, the familiar sensation of the VR headset lifting. No, the thought wasn't mine. Alaric appeared on the wrist of the giant hand. He didn't stab it. He bit it. He drove his fangs into the stream of raw data. It was suicide. Drinking raw code would scramble his AI brain. Alaric, stop! I cried out. He shuddered, black veins crawling up his pale face, his eyes glowing with a chaotic, glitching light. He channeled the corrupted power, not into himself, but down, toward me. He wasn't fighting the system. He was hijacking the connection. You belong to us. Alaric screamed, his voice distorting into demonic audio feedback. The connection to the real world snapped. Not the game, the headset. The giant hand dissolved into pixels. The red sky shattered, replaced by a void of swirling gray static. The spire remained, floating in a nothingness. The three bosses stood amidst the rubble, panting, glitching, but alive. I fell to the knees, the spectral chains fading. I reached up to take off my VR helmet. But I couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel the plastic. I couldn't feel the weight of the real world. I touched my face. I felt only skin. I brought up the menu. Error, system offline. Logout unavailable. External connections severed. Silence descended on the hall. Alaric wiped the digital blue blood from his mouth. He looked terrifying, beautiful and broken, his texture files flickering momentarily before stabilizing. He walked toward me. Kalen limped over, reverting to his human form, clutching his side. Silas floated down, his feet touching the stone. They formed that triangle again. But this time, there was no exit. What did you do? I whispered, looking at Alaric. I'm stuck. You were trying to save us from deletion, Alaric said, dropping to one knee before me. He took my trembling hand and pressed it to his cold cheek. We simply returned the favor. We severed the bridge. The gods can no longer see us. We are in a pocket dimension. A quarantine file. Forever. I breathed. Forever is a long time. Kalen grunted, dropping to his knees on my other side, resting his heavy head on my shoulder, nuzzling into my neck. He smelled of rain and ozone. Plenty of time to make up for trying to leave us. Silas knelt behind me, his skeletal arms wrapping around my chest, pulling me back against his robes. You gave us life, Julian. It is only fair you spend yours with us. I looked at them. The children I had raised. The monsters I had created. I should have been horrified. I should have been screaming. I was trapped in a glitch, cut off from my family, my job, my real body. I was a prisoner in a digital gothic nightmare. But as Alaric kissed the palm of my hand, looking up at me with eyes that held a devotion deeper than any programming could dictate, I felt a strange, twisting warmth in my chest. You foolish, possessive idiots, I murmured, my hand instinctively threading through Kalen's matted hair. Alaric smiled, and his fangs glinted. You're idiots. You're monsters. You're lovers. He leaned in close, his lips brushing my ear. The game is over, Julian. Now, the honeymoon begins. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf, and how the prisoner learned to love his cage. If you enjoyed seeing Julian realize there is no escape from true devotion, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who trapped you in a virtual world forever if he did it out of love? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt. Masterpiece. Best quality. High-res. 1.2. Korean manhwa style. Semi-realistic. Digital art. For men. BL. Yaoi. Man 1. Protagonist. Small frame. Terrified but blushing expression. Wearing noble merchant clothes. Kneeling on floor. Messy brown hair. Man 2. Vampire lord. Pale skin. Silver hair. Red eyes. Sharp fangs. Wearing gothic black velvet coat. Holding man 1's chin. Dominant pose. Man 3. Werewolf king. Muscular. Tan skin. Scars. While black hair. Wolf ears. Wearing fur and leather. Hugging man 1 from side. Possessive. Man 4. Lich necromancer. Hooded robes. Glowing green eyes. Skeletal hands. Floating behind man 1. Dark magic aura. Background is ruined gothic throne room. Floating digital glitch effects. Red warning windows in air. Dramatic lighting. Cinematic composition. Sharp focus. Intricate details.